Hey everybody, welcome. If you're new here, my name is Frank, and if you're returning, welcome back. So I'm going to break a YouTube rule in this video. It's not an official rule, it's not a rule that we have to be bound by, but it is generally accepted that in the world of YouTube, when you have a channel like Learning and Technology with Frank, this channel, you should have one subject that you cover and one subject only. It's called a niche. And the reason I'm breaking this rule is because normally here on this channel, I talk about how we can use technology to learn and teach more effectively, and specifically how we can use technology as a tool to leverage our own learning and productivity. Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about the various roles that are part of a career in data. So it's a little bit aside from what I would normally talk about here on the channel, but I did want to make this video for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's what I actually do as my day job. So I've been teaching for over 26 years, and I teach business intelligence and reporting, technology infrastructure. That's kind of my focus of what I teach. And this is a question I get all the time. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a video. I'm going to answer the question of what are the different roles in a career in data, what is the main function of each of these roles, and what are some of the things that distinguish one role from another. So if you're interested in that, this is the right video. If you're a regular viewer of Learning and Technology and you're not interested in data roles, this will be a brief side trip because we have an open house coming up where I work, and I just wanted to make this video because I get this question all the time. So without further ado, let's have a little bit of a departure from the main topic of the channel. Let's talk about the roles that are part of a career in data. In this video, we're going to look at 5 different roles that are part of a data organization. Now, not every organization will have these roles as distinct functions in the organization. It's going to depend on the size of the organization. It's also going to depend on the data maturity level of the organization. As an organization grows larger and becomes more mature, each of these roles will be represented within the organization, and they'll each be distinct. Many organizations would just prefer to have what we call a data unicorn, which was somebody that works with data and can do everything with data. Those are pretty hard to find. So the 5 roles that we're going to look at, the first role will be a database administrator. The second role we're going to take a look at is called a data engineer, sometimes referred to as a business intelligence analyst. We're going to take a look at the data analyst role, a very common term that's used. We're going to take a look at the data scientist role, and we're going to take a look at the artificial intelligence machine learning role. Now, all of these roles tend to overlap with each other in terms of their functions and responsibilities, but by understanding each of these roles, what they contribute to an organization, what they should contribute to an organization, you'll have a better idea of what you might like to pursue as a career in data and where you might fit or maybe have a pathway in terms of building a career working with data in an organization. So the first role, the database administrator, is maybe the most traditional role of them all. A database administrator is really responsible for the care and feeding of the data in an organization. A lot of times what happens is the database administrator will be responsible for things like database security, integrity of data, availability of data, the ability for data to serve operational functions. So a database administrator will often work with operational data stores that support an application. So think of it like someone that's taking care of the engine that runs the plane. A lot of times a database administrator will do things like index databases, look at optimizing queries in a database, giving user access to a database, those types of things. Unlike a lot of the other roles, a database administrator generally does not focus on analytics, but focuses more on the day-to-day operational needs to make sure that data is there where it needs to be for who it needs to be available to. The second role we're going to take a look at is that of the data engineer. And here's where we start taking operational data, maybe IoT, Internet of Things data, maybe third-party data, data from anywhere, and we look at the business use case for that data in terms of analytics and decision support systems. Once we understand how the data is going to be used, we then start building data pipelines. So a data pipeline is an architectural element. So the data engineer is really a data infrastructure specialist looking at building pipelines in order to ingest the data, collect the data, extract it from different sources, and then put it into some storage where we can then further process it and prepare the data so that it can be analyzed by data analysts, it can be worked on by data scientists, it can be used in AI and ML type of applications. Now, it's near and dear to my heart, this is actually what I teach, and it can be a lot of bleed over, which means that a lot of times a data engineer will also do data analytics, but at its heart, the data engineering role is a data infrastructure role, using things like ETL, extract, transform, load, extract, load, transform, direct to storage, data lakes. There's a lot of different architectural elements to build that data infrastructure to actually bring analytic capability to an organization. So it's a very important role that I actually see growing in importance, because a lot of times you can't just go and start analyzing data or building machine learning algorithms against data until you engineer the data so that it can be effectively used. I'm a little biased, again, because it's what I teach. But here we build the pipelines, we optimize those pipelines, we define the pipelines, we define the architecture, and we build that data infrastructure that all of our analytical solutions, all our science, and all our AI ML stuff will be built on top of. The third role is that of the data analyst. Now, data analyst is the term that we often see applied to job postings and such. It's really a catch-all phrase. I think a lot of times, in my opinion, when I see the role of data analyst and I read the job description, a lot of times what they're really looking for is a data engineer to clean up and prepare their data. And a lot of times, not a lot of times, but sometimes they're looking for somebody that's more of a data scientist, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Strictly speaking, a data analyst should be someone that takes that engineered data, the data that's already been prepared through data infrastructure, and creates things like reports on it, creates things like dashboards and visualizations, and works with people that have domain knowledge, such as supply chain, financial, customer service, and helps them make better business decisions using that data. It's a role that I think is very important. It's also an interesting role in that if I have a well-engineered data infrastructure, so if I have a really solid data engineering function where I have an infrastructure of really high quality data that's been prepared, then I can often take the data analysis role and give that to someone with domain knowledge. So instead of a data analysis person working with a supply chain person, I'll have the supply chain person actually do data analysis, which they can do because I've got a very well engineered infrastructure. So this is one of those roles that I'm very interested to see what will happen to it in the coming years, whether a lot of people that are currently data analysts will become more data engineers, or whether we have really good data engineering so that we have people that with domain knowledge that can do their own self-serve data analysis. It's going to be a very interesting role. The role itself right now does often involve some specialized skills that do involve some data manipulation and cleansing, but strictly speaking, it should be a role that really just helps people make better business decisions using data through visualizations, through reports, and through some data manipulation to prepare it into a format that the business can consume. Whether or not the business will be able to do that by themselves, so my finance person will be able to go to my data store and have analytical data that they can make their own decisions on without needing a data analyst, that remains to be seen. But for now, the role exists, although you have to read the description of any job postings because you may find that they're actually looking for a data engineer or even our next role, which is the data scientist. The fourth role, that of the data scientist, is an interesting role. They're all interesting in my opinion. I think data is a fascinating thing. But the data scientist tends to be a role that you won't find in smaller organizations. You might have a small organization that even combines the role of a data engineer and a data analyst into one. As that organization becomes a little bit larger, I think that engineering the data becomes more important, and then having the analysis done by either a specialist or a domain expert, that becomes possible. But the data scientist role, that's a role really reserved for larger organizations as a general rule. Because what you're doing as a data scientist is you're looking at running statistical methods against large data sets to look for patterns, to look for things that are hidden in the data, if you would. So a lot of times if you are trying to answer questions that you know you have the data and you just need to provide that answer faster, more efficiently, or with more accuracy, that's going to be the engineering role and then the analysis role. If you don't really know what patterns are in your data because you have so much of the data and you want to look for some interesting connections in the data, that's where the data scientist role comes in. So here we have someone that's going to be using a lot more mathematics, a lot more statistical analysis, a lot more algorithmic design in order to explore the data and to run scientific experiments on the data, the role of a data scientist. The fifth role, that of an AI ML specialist, artificial intelligence machine learning specialist, is a role where what we're doing is taking the data, having it learn from itself, do its own self-analysis, and then do predictive and prescriptive decision making. So a great example of this is using AI and ML to automate a procedure using data for the best and most optimal outcome based upon the data that's been put into the system, so that it can say, okay, we're going to order a certain product because we know we're going to need that product in 2 weeks. And we might still have some human intervention in terms of the final authorization before the purchase order goes out, but it's really a system where I'm taking large sets of data, looking for patterns, taking those patterns, learning from those patterns, and then acting upon those patterns through the machine learning artificial intelligence algorithms. It's a specialized skill. It's one that can really help with systems automation, especially of what we would consider mundane tasks, or maybe even sometimes complex tasks that humans cannot factor in all of the elements before they make a decision, but the AI ML algorithms can actually factor in massive amounts of data and give us our best next action, so to speak. That's a pretty simplistic description of this role because it is an evolving role. Now, all of these roles play a very important part in data analysis, but we see that with the AI ML, it's going to be something that will automate a lot of things for us and has the potential to really make data something that learns from itself and allows us to just be a guide to where the data is being used, as opposed to determining on our own where it's going to be used. This is getting a little science fiction-y here, but there's a lot to artificial intelligence and machine learning that makes it quite an interesting use of data. Now, these 5 roles do form the backbone of any data environment that you might go into. There are actually some other roles that I didn't mention, like data stewardship, being the data steward in charge of all the data, chief data officer, all of those types of roles. But for a general rule, those 5 roles, in my opinion, kind of cover the gambit of what's part of a data infrastructure, and they all play a very important role. The DBA making sure that the operational data is taken care of, the data engineer preparing the data so that we can actually do something useful with it, the data analyst, whether it's a specialized role or a domain-specific role where somebody's using data analysis to understand better decision making, the data science role where we have large amounts of data, and then the AI ML role where we're really looking at creating self-learning data to automate a lot of procedures. That's a fairly simplistic overview, but the idea is there. Now, each of these different roles requires different skill sets. This is not a typical video for the channel, as I mentioned at the beginning, but if you are interested in knowing what some of the skill sets are for each of these roles, just let me know in the comments down below. I'm always willing to make a few extra data videos for the channel, just as special events, I suppose. And I do have a link below to a brain that I created on business intelligence. A brain is basically a big mind map. So I have a big public mind map on business intelligence that I can share. And I'm also happy to share my mind maps on database administration, data analysis, business data science, and artificial intelligence and machine learning. I just tend to work in the realm of business intelligence and data engineering. So if you found the video useful, if you want to learn what the skills are in each of these positions, there's a lot of overlap, there's a lot of unique skills. Let me know in the comments down below. I'll see you in the next video, and I hope this one was useful in helping you understand the roles of data within an organization.